So I joke that I'm like the accidental entrepreneur. I was not looking to start a company at all. I really was not planning on hanging out a shingle. But all of a sudden, I had all these investors seeking me out, asking for help. I started calling my favorite marketing people that I used to work with earlier in my career. Everybody had just been laid off because, like I said, marketing budgets were getting slashed left and right. I had people, I had projects, and I put them together. And I called the women the marketing mavens and the guys the marketing moguls. And for short, we were the mavens and moguls. And that was 21 years ago, and we've been at it ever since.
Welcome to the Renegade Lawyer podcast, the show where we ask the questions, why aren't more lawyers living flourishing lives and inspiring others? And can you really get wealthy while doing only the work you love with people you like? Many lawyers are. Get ready to hear from your host, Ben Glass, the founder of the law firm Ben Glass Law in Fairfax, Virginia, and Great Legal Marketing, an organization that helps good people succeed by coaching, inspiring, and supporting law firm owners. Join us for today's conversation.
Hey everyone, this is Ben Glass again. This is the Renegade Lawyer podcast where I get to interview people inside and outside the legal world who are making a ding in the world. And today, interesting guest. She calls herself kind of reformed, big ad, big marketing, big company, now turned entrepreneur, Paige Arnof Fenn. Very briefly, Paige was the first VP of marketing and the CMO at Zipcar, VP of marketing at Inc.com, big brands, and the first senior vice president of marketing at Launch Media. She's worked as a special assistant to the chief marketing officer of global marketing at Coca-Cola company. So Paige, that is a different world from the world that most of my audience is from. But you were telling me before we went live that after 9/11, you had a different view, you took a different path, and now you're helping people like our lawyer listeners build their brands in a very smart way. So Paige, welcome to the podcast today.
Thanks, Ben, for having me. I'm excited to chat.
I fleshed out very briefly your background, but I am always curious about what it is that brought someone who's good at what they're doing to where they are today, because I'm sure the journey has ups and downs and, great highlights and maybe some low points, but flesh out a little bit more your background.
So, it was a very circuitous path to get here. When I was a student, I thought I was going to be the next Meg Whitman. I was, getting my MBA and I wanted to go run a big Fortune 500 business. And I loved marketing and I thought I would come up through the marketing function and be the CEO of like a global brand. And that was the path I was on. I worked at Procter & Gamble. I worked at Coca-Cola. But then the internet came onto the scene and I got bitten by the dot-com bug. And I left my big cushy corporate job at Coke and joined a startup that no one had ever heard of before. I think my parents thought I was having a nervous breakdown.
Probably.
But it was the mid to late 90s. And, it just seemed so exciting. All these companies that were raising lots of money, they were using it to do marketing. And the world was just changing. So I joined the first of 3 startups out in Los Angeles. We raised about $40 million, most of which went into marketing. And less than 2 years later, we went public and we were sold to Yahoo. So it was a wild ride. I had a blast. And then my husband and I moved back to the East Coast. I did another startup as the head of marketing. About 18 months later, we got sold to a global private company. I did another startup as the head of marketing, and that also went public and was sold. And so I call them my 3 base hits. It was a lot of fun. It was just a wild ride. And then 9/11 hit, and that changed everything. You're old enough to remember.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
The world came to a screeching halt. And the first thing every company did post 9/11 was cut their marketing budget. I think they wanted to conserve cash. The stock market went crazy and people were nervous. They didn't know if they were going to be able to raise money again. And I was just going to hang out and take care of some family and personal business, clean out my basement. And because I had run marketing at 3 successful internet startups, that all had good exits. They were all backed by venture capitalists and private equity. The investors came back and said, Paige, we need your help. We just fired our marketing department. We need help. What are you doing? And I said, I'm not doing anything. And the company I just was running marketing for went public and got sold. And they said, great, you're available. Come help us. And my first instinct was, I'm not really a consultant. I'm the client. I'm the chief marketing officer. I'm not good at PowerPoint. I'm not really somebody who sits on the sidelines to give advice. I like to roll up my sleeves and get stuff done.
Do it.
And you're like, great, that's what we need. We need somebody to roll up their sleeves and get stuff done. So my husband convinced me, there's a big red flashing sign in front of you. You know what to do. You know how to help. Help them. Send them an invoice. You're a consultant now. What's the big deal? So I joked that I'm like the accidental entrepreneur. I was not looking to start a company at all. I really was not planning on hanging out a shingle. But all of a sudden, I had all these investors seeking me out, asking for help. I started calling my favorite marketing people that I used to work with earlier in my career. Everybody had just been laid off because, like I said, marketing budgets were getting slashed left and right. I had people, I had projects, and I put them together. And I called the women the marketing mavens and the guys the marketing moguls. And for short, we were the mavens and moguls. And that was 21 years ago, and we've been at it ever since. So, Ben, I never wrote a business plan. If you had met me in business school, I would have sworn I would be running a Fortune 500 company by now. But here we are.
So most lawyers start companies, law firms, without a business plan too. So there's a mutual feeling there. Can you just go back for a moment? And is there a way to sort of briefly describe what is it like being in the room marketing at big brands, not in pre-startup, so Coca-Cola, what does that actually look like? And then when you had the opportunity to work with these startups and be in the middle of those rooms, as someone who has never been, in any other business really besides a law firm and a marketing coaching business, me and my listeners, they just don't know. What was it really? We've watched Ad Men, right? So we know that. But what is it really like inside? And if you can contrast these big, big corporate brands and then startups backed by VC money and people say, go, go, go.
So starting your marketing career at places like Procter & Gamble and Coca-Cola is really a luxury because they really invest in their talent in-house. They train you and develop you as a corporate marketer. They literally have classes that you take. There's a lot of hierarchy and structure. They really teach you how to do the basic blocking and tackling. Everything from package design, pricing, advertising copy. I joke that, I got my undergraduate degree in economics. I got an MBA. Going to Procter & Gamble out of my business school was like getting a PhD in marketing because P&G invented the concept of brand management. They run each brand like a business. So a brand manager has P&L responsibility for that brand. And working at Coca-Cola for me was like my postdoctorate in marketing. My boss was the chief marketing officer of Coke. Coke is the most recognized brand in the world. It's sold in over 200 countries around the world. And my boss was the guy who did both New Coke and Diet Coke, which was the biggest failure and the biggest success ever in the history of marketing. So it was truly an education starting my career, those brands as foundations. Big brands have big budgets. They have ad agencies, PR agencies. So, I was learning from the best, but you're allowed to be a little bit lazy, if I could say that, because you can afford to throw a lot of things against the wall. Some of it's going to stick. Some of it's not going to stick. You can, run down parallel paths and then fund the thing that really gets the most traction. So it was really a luxury to start my marketing career at these very big established businesses. I worked on CoverGirl Cosmetics at Procter & Gamble. That was a 35-year-old business. And Coca-Cola was over 100 years old when I joined the business. So there was a lot of legacy. There was a lot of momentum. These brands existed without me, and they were rolling downhill no matter how good of a marketer I was. There was a lot of momentum. When I joined each of those 3 startups, no one had ever heard of them before. With the first startup out in Los Angeles, we didn't have a logo. We didn't have a tagline. I mean, when I tell you, they didn't really even have a marketing department. I was hiring all the basic pieces and developing all the basic collateral material, the blocking, the tackling. They didn't have assets, no marketing assets. So we were developing everything from the ground floor. And each of those startups were in various stages of truly startup. I mean, we had not officially arrived yet. So when you are part of the DNA of a brand and you're literally, at P&G and Coke, there's a process to do everything. They have a system. You follow the breadcrumbs. When I joined these startups, like I said, I didn't even have a staff in some of them. I was hiring the people and I was teaching them. I was the only traditionally trained, classically trained marketer in the group. The first startup I worked for was out in Los Angeles. And here I had come from a big corporate environment where people dressed up to go to work. At Coca-Cola, men didn't leave their offices without putting their jacket on to go to the bathroom or the cafeteria. My team in Los Angeles, there was body art, there were nose rings, people brought their pets to work. They were wearing flip-flops. I mean, this was not the most professional environment, but the startup world in the 90s was like the Wild West. And none of them had come from corporate jobs. So I was teaching them how to do market research. But at P&G and Coke, market research could take 6-9 months. I mean, you're doing like statistically significant research with your target audience, talking to hundreds, if not thousands of people, and you put out surveys and you do focus groups. And like I said, it takes months. At the startup in Los Angeles, when the team got into the office in the morning, people would grab their coffee. We'd sit around the conference table. We'd come up with a bunch of things we wanted to learn that day. We would mock up samples, and I would send the team out to the street to intercept anybody that looked like they were part of our target audience. They would go out at lunch to the promenade in Santa Monica, intercept anyone that looked like they were 18 to 24 that might be into our product, ask them some questions, give them some swag to thank them for their time. We would come back to the conference room in the afternoon. We'd tally up our votes to see what got the highest rating. And before we went home that night, we'd put things out on our website. And then we'd read the data the next morning and see what got the highest clicks. And then we'd iterate again the next day. So you can't wait 6 or 9 months on an internet business. You have a day or two, and then you learn, tweak, you pivot, and you keep moving forward.
I'm curious now. So those were 2 completely different worlds. So obviously marketing is in your DNA, else you wouldn't have gone through that course of study to get to where you started. When you found the world of the startups, or the world of the startups found you, and now you are, card table, and let's figure this out on the fly. Did you say to yourself, oh my gosh, like this is what I've always been waiting for. I didn't even know that I was waiting for this. Or did it take you a while to go, look up, I don't have 17 assistants under me?
So I think the epiphany was, leaving a big cushy corporate job, you don't know how much of it is you and how much of it is the inertia of the business.
100-year-old business. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, I always felt a little stifled and constrained in my corporate jobs. like I said, P&G invented the concept of brand management. So when I'd be in meetings with my boss or my group, I might say, I know you want us to do X, Y, Z, but instead of doing it the way we always do it, have you ever thought about doing ABC instead? P&G's not interested in ABC. They've perfected X, Y, and Z.
Right.
The system for X, Y, and Z, and the system works. Every category they compete in, they are the number one and sometimes number one and number two brand in that category. So they're not looking for somebody to recreate the wheel. And I think the big shock to me was I didn't realize how much I had actually internalized and learned all those years in corporate. And when I was in a situation that really was the Wild West, there were no rules, there was no process to do anything. I realized, I actually know how to do this, and I can explain it to the people on my team, and we don't have to spend 9 months doing research. We can do the executive summary, take some shortcuts and detours, and learn a lot. And it's like the 80-20 rule. We're not going to get statistically significant research, but I don't need 100% accuracy. If we're 80% of the way there, and we can throw stuff up on the internet tonight and see who gets the most clicks and see where the traction is, that's enough on the internet to keep moving forward. So I think in retrospect, I was shocked after my first startup. And like I said, we went public in less than 2 years. And then the second one, and then the third one, I thought, damn, I've learned a lot. And I'm actually shocked I was as successful as I was in my corporate chapter of my career. Because like I said, I was always the person trying to bend, break, and change the rules. If you would talk to any of my corporate bosses, they would have told you Paige was really smart. She worked her tail off, but God, was she a pain in the ass. They would say, she was always coming up with these, have you thought about this? Or why don't we try that? I never saw myself as entrepreneurial. I was just coming up with ideas. But now I realize, I think today corporate jobs are more entrepreneurial than they were in the 80s and 90s. But I think really I was meant to be an entrepreneur all along. I just didn't even know that path existed. That wasn't really a thing when I was in school.
So that's why you're here on the Renegade Lawyer podcast, because so many lawyers who are part of Great Legal Marketing and who listen to this podcast and reach out to me, they use the words that you've just used, which is, I never realized that there was an entrepreneurial potential in legal. And now that I found it, I see what you've been talking about all these years, Ben. And, my example is, Paige, in my law practice, I represent high wage earners, lawyers, doctors going through disability issues. And so I've represented a number of what I would call big law young associates, someone who've been out 7-8 years, and something happens to them and now they can't work. Usually something cognitive. They can't work their usual 80 to 100-hour work week. And they're making good money. So I'll say, dude, you're making $250, but you're killing yourself. Did you know that you actually don't have to work that hard to make $250? And they go, well, no, you're wrong, Ben. That's impossible. And I go, no, actually it is. And it is possible. And the sad part is, through college, through law school, and through their 7-8 years to the profession, no one has ever shown them there's an entrepreneurial door over here where you can actually work less, make more money, your family will love you, and unleash your genius. And it's not for everybody. Look, and we'll talk here in a second, because after 9/11, you said, the accidental entrepreneur, right? So entrepreneurism and entrepreneurial ventures are not for everyone. But I do think that as a society, we need to be introducing these concepts, especially to younger people, earlier, that there's a way to carve a path for your own life and be really happy and make money and serve the world. At the end of the day, he or she who serves the world best tends to be the one who's happiest and driven by the work that they do, I think.
Bingo.
All right,
Totally.
So after 9/11, accidental entrepreneur, what and you have the DNA, you have the talent, you knew what you said. Look, I was surprised at how much I actually knew and had internalized. But now you have your own business and you're hiring people and you're scaling and probably more people are lining up outside your door. So I'm curious what you found challenging as you moved from two different kind of corporate worlds, but now it's your own gig where you have to learn, I imagine, some business skills that you didn't have responsibility for earlier.
Yeah. So I'd say the big kind of aha moments for me were both on the kind of internal colleague talent side and the client side. So when you go work for someone else, you're assigned projects, you're assigned business. You don't really have a choice in that. You might like it, you might not like it. When it's your name on the door, when it's your shingle that you hung, it's on you. And one of my very first clients was really a jerk. And he signed a $10,000 a month retainer piece of business for a year. And this was in my first month or two of business. So I thought, wow, I'm already making six figures. This is awesome. And the guy was just insufferable. And we were doing PR for him. And he had a great story, and my PR people are awesome. And we were getting him press everywhere. I mean, small town, local press, big national, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. Like this guy, he was like a media darling. The problem was the more press we got him, the bigger jerk he became. And 3 months into the 12 months agreement, he was being very slow to pay every month. And we had our monthly check-in. The team came to his office and we sat down at his conference table. And I said to him, before we jump into the agenda, since you've got the whole team here, maybe you could just start by thanking them for all the great press they've gotten you in the first 90 days. And do you have any specific questions before we come through our punch list? And he gave me this look like, what are you talking about? Like, why would I thank you? I'm paying you.
Yeah, you're the slave. I'm the master.
Exactly. And I was like, whoa, that did not sit well with me. And I said, well, now that you mention it, you actually haven't paid us this month. And I'm hoping before we leave today, you could cut a check and hand it to me so we get caught up, because he was about a month behind. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, I thought, this guy's a jerk. Everyone that knows him knows he's a jerk. And his friends are seeing all this amazing press we're getting for him. And what the pants off of me was, if his friends realized that we could get such great press for a guy who's such an idiot and such a nasty guy, they might want to hire my firm too. And their rationale would be, I mean, I'm a jerk, but I'm not as big of a jerk as him. If they can do this for him, imagine what they could do for me. And I thought, oh my God, I've only been in business a few months. And if this is going to be my clientele, I'm going to be a miserable entrepreneur. Like, I don't want to build a business with clients like this. And the meeting ended, and he was making an excuse why he wanted to put a check in the mail and not pay us before we left. And I just said to him, you know what? I think what we need to do is shake hands and part ways after today. Let's get caught up on the payments, and, we'll finish out the month. And then I think you'll probably be better served with a different team. And the guy was really taken aback. He said, are you firing me as a client? And I thought, yeah, I think I am. And I realized, even though he was paying us 10 grand a month, we were probably servicing him at least 25% more time than he was paying us for, because we were doing so well and getting so much traction. And he didn't appreciate it at all. He wasn't a nice client. I didn't want to attract more people like him. And I thought, it's like feng shui. You kind of clear out the clutter and you open space for better stuff. And within a month, I already had refilled that
Sure.
revenue with much better clients who were a better fit, who really kind of got our team. And those were the kind of clients I wanted to replicate going forward.
Hey guys, this is Ben. If you like what you've been hearing on this podcast, not just the marketing and practice building strategies, but the philosophy of the art of living your best life parts, you should know that my son Brian and I have built a tribe of like-minded lawyers who are living lives of their own design and creating tremendous value for the world within the structure of a law practice. We invite you to join us at the only membership organization for entrepreneurial lawyers that is run by 2 full-time practicing attorneys. Check us out at greatlegalmarketing.com. Here's something big from that I teach lawyers, and I want you to listen to lawyers who are listening to this, is that what Paige did most of all is she was protecting her team. So she had a really good team of A players, and we lawyers do not need to work for bad clients. And every so often, a bad client will make his or her way through the filtering system. In our office, you get one warning and one chat from Ben if you are marching down that path, and then you're fired. And we don't care how big your case is or how important you think you are, because the case is going to end at some point. But when I build and retain a team of A players and show that. So one of the things we do, Paige, is if I'm having that conversation on the phone with a client who's giving my team a hard time, my team is in the room on speakerphone listening to me, and I'm rational, but I'm protecting my team because actually I've prepared for the call. I've already read all the emails. I've listened and transcribed any calls that were potential troublesome calls. So I know exactly what's going on. If we've made a mistake, we own it, right? But you don't get to beat on my team. And so it's interesting because, I'm a lot about marketing. You and I are going to talk about brand building and building a space for yourself here in a minute. But the last thing we want to do is create marketing and brands that drive more people down who aren't the right people for our team. Because it makes, you realize you woke up and go, we're actually doing more work. We're making this guy a superstar. Like he should be like bragging to his friends about us and being the best client we've ever had. He's not, we'll cut him loose. But it makes no sense, lawyers, to do marketing that drives people down either a crappy funnel or drives crappy people down a funnel.
And the point you raised is so important because that is exactly spot on the point. The team, we left that meeting and they knew I had their back.
Yes.
They knew that I didn't like the way he was treating me or them, and I was not going to put up with that. And it really emboldened the team to be like, wow, this is the kind of place I want to be part of. These are the kinds of clients I don't want to work with anymore. And it really just from a chemistry and culture standpoint, really solidified, again, in the first few months of our business, it sent a very strong signal. The optics were, we don't need the business that badly. We'd much rather build the right clientele and the right kind of client base and grow organically and strategically and not just take anything that lands in our lap, because that is not a recipe for success. But those people that were with me at the beginning have stayed with me. We've been in together more than 2 decades, and a lot of those original people are still with me. And like you said, that is gold.
Yes. So again, most lawyers, and we'll talk about professional practices here in a minute, they think the answer is like, I got to do more advertising, more branding, let's get more clients in the door. Actually, your strategic advantage in the world is a great team, right? Because a great team will just make your life wonderful. And particularly if you've got people that are year after year after year are there and they're elevating themselves within your own business, and they are then attracting other A players to the team. So lawyers, like, start with your internal systems and your team, I think, before you spend another dime driving a potential crappy client down into your law firm. All
Yeah,
right.
great brands are built from the inside out, not the outside in.
They really are. They really are. So, all right. So now let's talk about the work that you're doing today, because I know that you do work with a lot of professional practices, not just lawyers, but others. And you are, as you just described with this client, I think maybe your niche within a niche is helping people have a voice through PR. But I want to talk about that because at Great Legal Marketing, we don't talk enough about the PR, the public relations strategy and things that lawyers can do with or without professionals like you. So let's talk about that. How do you make these professionals get more patients, more clients? How do you help them do that through your work today?
Yep. So one of the biggest reasons why people hire us is to elevate their profile and increase their visibility. So I think a lot of people in professional services, they see their competitors being quoted in the media. They see them, online, offline, hear them on the radio, and they say, why is that guy getting all the quotes? Why is that guy speaking at all the conferences?
And then usually they say, he's not as smart as I am.
Exactly. I'm a better attorney. I'm a better professional.
Yeah.
We have a much stronger business, but yet that woman's everywhere. And I'm like the best kept secret. What's going on? Well, the dirty little secret is those people probably hired professional media relations people to promote them. And so what somebody like my team can do is we can help you kind of increase your visibility, elevate your profile online and offline through social media, through content marketing, through thought leadership, there's something called bylined articles. You want to start publishing articles in trade journals online. We can help draft them, and then we put your name on it. So Mavens and Moguls, my company is invisible, and it looks like Ben Glass wrote the article. And you're now in Lawyers Weekly. You're now in, whatever trade magazine, if you're in retail or education or whatever. So that is very popular. People want to be speaking at conferences. A lot of that is, you have to fill out speakers requests and, present yourself with topics, put together a package. It doesn't just happen. It's not a mystery how these things happen. So, we are working with professional service firms in a very strategic, methodical way to help them, target specific verticals, specific audiences, and putting together story angles and quotes, responding in real time to trends that are happening in the news.
Big deal. Yeah.
That's a huge opportunity. And it is a separate job. Like if you're a lawyer, you've probably got your day job, your dance card is pretty full. So it's someone other than you waking up every day thinking, wow, this would be a great opportunity for Ben to respond. I would love to get Ben quoted in that roundup. I bet Ben could talk about his client, X would be a perfect sidebar case study for that article. So journalists are constantly looking for people, to talk about, things that they've seen in real life. And, if my antenna's up, I've got, eyes and ears always out there canvassing these media outlets for opportunities for you to chime in.
Yeah. What's interesting is, so in our world, in the personal injury space, we often talk about, we try to make the claims adjuster's job easy by providing great claims packages that are organized and, they can trust the information we're giving them. It's the same thing because on the media side, hey, the whole world is 24/7, right? And they're all working hard. And really, you're helping that media person making his or her job easier by putting in front of them curated content or people that you've already done the homework to make sure that you're actually speaking to the need of the media.
Right. We know their beat. We know their deadline. And so, as you said, one trend we've seen over years, but certainly over COVID, it accelerated, is a lot of media outlets have just cut back their resources. So the
Yeah.
people that are the reporters, the journalists, they have less time, less resources. And so if you can make their job easier and serve it to them on a silver platter with the quote ready to go, and you know that person likes to be pitched on email or on Twitter or whatever, all of a sudden you've got a prepackaged quote, you've got a media kit with the photo, with the LinkedIn profile, with whatever, and all they have to do is cut and paste. Now, if they're on deadline and you've made it easy for them, and someone else is like, making it a real chore, who do you think they're going to use as their go-to source? It's a no-brainer.
Right. The next person is showing that how amateurish, how little they actually know about the needs of this particular media source. And
Yep.
so what you're doing, what I really like what you're doing from the entrepreneurial standpoint is you're creating a win-win relationship. And really it's a tripartite. You have your client, the media person, and your own business. And everybody wins when you do your job well. And they're in the world, there's an abundance mentality and there's a scarcity mentality. And those of us who live in the world of abundance believe there are no limits. Like me winning does not take anything from you. And you're looking for a win, win, win. How do we do this? So can you give us a couple of examples, and you can name names or not, like, cause like you said, like you were working in the background, but can you think, Paige, of some examples, particularly in the lawyer space or maybe in other professional services, where you helped a firm or an individual because you saw space, you got them in front of a reporter or a media source, and share some examples with us?
So the examples are everywhere. A lot of times, the reporters not only have blogs, but they have podcasts. They have, they're freelancers and they're working for multiple media outlets. And so when you help them in one area, they'll say, that was such a great interview. I'd love to have you on my podcast. Or I'm doing another article. This was for Lawyers Weekly, but next week I'm doing something Forbes, or next week I'm doing something for Crane's Business, or, some other, NPR. And I think you'd be great on that. The other thing that's a win-win, sometimes I would call it, like, let's say we were working together and I'd say, Ben, this reporter is awesome. You're not great for this story, but I think you can provide some background information based on this client of yours that would really help her. Could you spend 10 or 15 minutes on the phone for background source material? And trust me, the next time she needs help, she's going to remember you were generous with your time. You made her, she's not going to quote you, but a lot of the information you give her is going to be part of that article, and she will come back to you. And you do that, and it's like when you give before you get, they come back a million times over.
100%. Look, I tell people this all the time. They're like, well, what's in it for me? I'm like, no. Your job is to go plant seeds and improve the world. Like, put value into the world first. And I guarantee you, because it's happened to us over and over again, put value into the world and it'll come back to you. And part of this, I want to ask you about this, because a lot of people, particularly professionals and weirdly lawyers, like, they're thinking, well, I don't actually have anything of value. My story isn't that special. It's not that unique. Like, who would want to listen to me? I imagine that you have clients who want, more clients, but they have this internal fear that they're not really good enough to be quoted, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, whatever it is. So how do you help that person get through this mental mind block?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you get to your age or my age, and there's a lot of things that are kind of intuitive to you because you've just been doing them for so long that you don't even appreciate what a nugget that is for other people, or the fact that you can extrapolate from that experience into a different category that might seem completely random, but tangentially, it's actually very relatable. I mean, let's go back to the story we started with about having to fire the client. It didn't matter that I was a marketing and branding company. you had an exact situation in your legal practice. So, I think people want it to be like apples and apples. But the truth is, sometimes square pegs and round holes, actually, there's a lot of overlap where you don't realize that you're actually helping people in ways you can't even appreciate. So I would always, a lot of people feel like they've got like imposter syndrome or something like.
Exactly. That's it. It is imposter syndrome.
And it's like, that's not true. Actually, you know
100%.
a lot, you know so much, and you just have to kind of get out of your own way and realize that, like, I always tell people, like, they're hesitant maybe to talk about situations where they feel like they screwed up or they were vulnerable. But in fact, those situations are like where you show the most learning and growth and you show your humanity. And that's what people really remember. That's what resonates. And, nobody really remembers the facts and the figures, but they remember the stories. So I always tell people, share the war stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because people relate to that and people love stories. That's what sticks with them. When you can touch people emotionally and connect with them on kind of an emotional level, that's where the magic occurs.
You're 100% right. And because if you think about like law and legal and lawyers who represent consumers, I think most people out there in the world don't need a lawyer, and many will go through their whole lives never needing a lawyer. So the fact that you're really good at what you do isn't particularly meaningful to them. My story is, if your brain heard the radio ad about removing squirrels from your attic, but you don't actually have that problem, you don't actually hear the ad. Okay. So you're not paying attention to that company at all. But what we all hardwired to pay attention to, because this is how man communicated, is storytelling. And so many people know us, our law firm, not because we're lawyers per se, but we're deeply embedded in the community, in our gyms, in our churches, in our kids' schools. Like, they know that we run marathons, referee soccer games, all that stuff. They know these things about us, and they remember, oh yeah, he's a lawyer, so let me just call and see if he can refer me to someone. And it's funny, Paige, because lawyers have a hard time, I think, many lawyers, opening these stories up, opening up, as you say, their vulnerabilities, the things that didn't work out so well, the things that they're not really good at. And yet these are the big connectors. Because we're humans. We're humans.
I tell people in professional services, and whether it's legal, accounting, any professional service business, your story is your client's story. It's not about you. It's how have you helped them achieve their goals. So take yourself out of it. Get out of your own way. How have you helped your clients be successful? Because if you can sell them, they can sell anybody. Honestly, they will be your biggest champions, ambassadors, and advocates. You help them, and they're, I've had clients say to me, oh my God, Paige, like, what you did for my business, I can't thank you enough. I just, emailed a friend of mine who's having a similar problem. And I told her, if they don't hire you, they're insane. Now, do you think an ad in the New York Times would have been more compelling?
Correct.
Than a
Right.
personal friend picking up the phone saying, I'm really sorry you're having this problem, but I know how to fix this problem. It's one phone call away. Guess what? That person hired me after one meeting.
Lawyers need to remember that the clients are the heroes. For most lawyers, their clients have much harder jobs and much harder lives than the lawyers do. We work in nice office buildings and we don't have to lift heavy packages and stuff like that. And part of our branding is, we help the sick and injured tell their stories to skeptical insurance companies. Like, all right, that's exactly what we do and we live for. I want to spend the last couple of minutes here, Paige, talking about your business, what it might look like for someone to work with you. So someone who's listening to the Renegade Lawyer podcast, or who's a member of Great Legal Marketing, who's interested in having you help get their voice out. So give me some general idea of what that looks like. And then, of course, we'll send people to a web page if they're interested in following up.
Great. So at its very basic level, our clients find the right words and pictures to tell their stories. If we've learned anything during the last 3+ years, is that if you don't exist online, you don't exist. So COVID taught us a very important lesson. Your online presence really matters. So if you do not have a website, if people put in your name or your company name in Google and nothing pops up, you're in trouble. So if you need finding your story, creating your platform, again, finding those words and pictures to tell the world who you are, give us a buzz. We can help you with a logo, a tagline, a basic website, just so you show up. If, on the other hand, you put your name or your company name in Google and stuff comes up that you're not particularly proud of, that's a problem too. So if you've got digital dirt out there or maybe your name happens to be the same name as a serial killer or a porn star or somebody that there might be some confusion. Because Ben, when people reach out to you and you decide, do I want to have a meeting with this person? Am I going to grab coffee? Do I want to set up a call? Do I want them on my podcast? You check them out online. And if they don't show up or if what shows up is potentially damaging, you may not ever call them back or follow up. So again, we can help you create a great online presence and, get some really positive stories out there. With a name like mine and a company name like mine, I have a hyphenated last name. I have an unusual company name. If you Google me, it really is me. But if your name is like Jack Smith, they're not going to know who you are. You're invisible. So that's really important. But the two biggest buckets in terms of ways we help organizations, service firms specifically, as I said, PR, thought leadership, content marketing, that is a very big bucket. The other bucket that, again, has become more important than ever with COVID is market research, because everything in the world has changed so much in the last 3.5 years. So how are you talking to people? What are you saying? What's your offer? Do you have a value proposition?
What are people saying about you?
Right. And how do you stack up versus the competition? Do you own unique real estate in your customer's mind? Do they know what problem you solve? If you haven't done market research, if you don't know what the market says about you, where you fit in the landscape, we should talk, because market research today is more important than ever. And whatever you thought you knew 4 or 5 years ago, trust me, it's changed and you need to check in and figure it out.
Just the last 90 to 120 to 180 days.
No, absolutely. It's changed since COVID.
Well, and the onslaught of AI and technology.
Absolutely. No, it's all different now.
That's a whole nother podcast, but we have lawyers that are running towards AI very fast and figuring out how can I leverage this. And then there's lawyers who are like, oh my gosh, this is so scary. We're running with the lawyers who are running towards the opportunities. But and at the end of the day, if a consumer has a need and doesn't have someone to refer them to, then they're on the internet. And you're right, Paige, they're making kind of instantaneous, 4 seconds long decisions. Does this person look like he or she has the experience and knowledge to deal with my problem or not? And if not, I'm moving on. And oh, by the way, I can quote interview 10 lawyers by watching their YouTube videos in an hour. So it's a highly competitive, much more competitive world than it was, even a couple of years ago, but certainly 15 and 20 and now the 40 years ago that I've been doing this. When I started, it was all yellow pages, who could buy the biggest yellow page out?
Oh, right. And also, with all the different platforms out there, it's really important that you're telling a consistent story, that you're building a trusted brand online. And I think one of the first things we do when we start working with new clients is do a communications audit. Because if you're trying to be one person on LinkedIn and a different person on Facebook and yet another person on Twitter, and then your corporate website tells a different story, you're not really exuding a lot of confidence and building trust. People don't know which version of you is going to show up at the meeting. And, is it the partier? Is it the professional one? Is it the snarky one? That's not a good look. So, again, sometimes it helps having an independent, objective professional kind of take a fresh look and say, you know what? You're diluting your brand because you've got too many messages. You're trying to stand for too many things, and you need to pick a lane and you need to own that lane. And we can help you do that.
You are coaching them to the next stage of their journey. Paige, if folks want to follow up, what's the website URL, the best way to get in contact with you?
So the company is Mavens and Moguls. It's MAVENSANDMOGULS.com. I'm on LinkedIn. My last name is hyphenated, but LinkedIn they just smush it all together. So it's Paige Arnof Fenn, all one word. And then, as one of my clients always says, because my last name is hyphenated and the company has an ampersand in between the two words, whenever she forgets, she just Googles Paige and Mavens, and I pop right up. So thank God for search engine optimization.
You own that space.
Exactly.
This has been wonderful. I'm sure folks have gotten value through this. And again, mavensandmoguls.com. And Paige is real easy to find on LinkedIn, and she is rocking the world. So thanks, Paige, for your time today.
Ben, thanks for having me. This has been an awesome discussion.
If you like what you just heard on the Renegade Lawyer podcast, you may be a perfect fit for the great legal marketing community. Law firm owners across the country are becoming heroes to their families and icons in their communities. They've gone renegade by rejecting the status quo of the legal profession so they can deliver high-quality legal services coupled with top-notch customer service to clients who pay, stay, and refer. Learn more at greatlegalmarketing.com. That's greatlegalmarketing.com.